Good afternoon, it's Joyful Hermit. Well, I've been away from videos for 2 or 3 days. The handyman was here, and I try to work with him as best I can, trying to build up some stamina. I have to take lots of back pain breaks, but also just to sort of keep tabs. And I always find things, and then I have to go at it with him. And because I know how to do the work. I basically just need someone to do lifting for me, but that's not realistic to find someone who's willing just to come and do lifting. They want to do more and to get more work done or to get more income, have a bigger job to do. That's why a contractor who has subcontractors, I called, hasn't even bothered calling back. And I found out my neighbor who recommended him, well, she knows him through her church system. So that's why he did their house that way, but he's not going to do mine that way. I don't belong. I'm not Mormon. So anyway, so I have my handyman, grateful, and I have to just practice lots of forbearance as he does with me, because he didn't even want me helping to drive in drywall screws yesterday. And he hung the drywall with huge gaps. You're only supposed to have 1/8 of gap between, but after a while, I just can't deal with it because it's just always fussing. He's very, very volatile, but he has a good heart. And he's sort of fallen away from church, and I am trying to be a witness. And because he's got good in him, he's got this personality issue going, and he's maybe, and I told him yesterday about what he talks about. I said, maybe it's joked with him about it's like 10 and 11-year-old boys find humor in that kind of thing. Let your imagination go, and you'll hit on what he's fascinated with. And he's 49. So we've got some work to do there. And mostly praying. I'm just praying, and I need to get lots of work done before he comes back in a week, or I might have to extend him, because I want to do my own work as best as I can, because I prefer it, slow as I am, and save a lot of money, and then having things not as I like to have them for the next person, because when I take on a project, anything, I am doing it for God, and other people don't have that attitude. I ran into that with the Home Depot employee, this cabinet woman, who thinks it's okay to sell particle board for bathrooms. No, it's not. And we do it all the time anyway. And I said, well, your new employee that's transferring from another store understands and says it's never done. And she doesn't do it. So I said, that's how it is. That's the right way, because they will suck up water, and you'll have ruined all your cabinets will be ruined. And what good is that? Just wait until you can pay the little bit extra, or wait for a sale, or get less fancy cabinets and get plywood box cabinets. It's my public service announcement from doing many of these and having many homes in my life. My husband used to move a lot, and I understood later why. He'd always be getting a new job. So I won't go into that. I think I already have. Anyway, we pray for people, and it's probably why God has all my injuries and ailments, because this is what he's always had to do from I can remember back when I was 20. I didn't have the courage to change colleges, and I was in the wrong college for me, and really was in the wrong degree area. But my dad always felt every woman should have a teaching degree, because it worked out so well with his wife. Well, she loved it. She was a natural teacher. She was an excellent teacher. And I'm sure, though, if I had had courage and come up with something different, my mother would have backed me on it, but I didn't. I lacked courage. And that's, I think, my issue now. And I lack conviction of, I think, or something that I guess I need God to make it just so very clear. And I know how a hermit's supposed to be and live. And I knew what my spiritual father wrote to me in the last note he sent me while he was yet on earth. And I didn't do that. I didn't take his advice. And instead, I continued on with renovating another house, getting one that needed some renovating for a project. So I like projects, and it's great physical exercise for me because you're not sitting, you're moving around, you're mudding the walls, you're painting. I've said this before, but I know now God did not want this. And I'm saying, oh Lord, Lord, please, I've got the message. I'll work with this handyman to try to get this done in the next 2 or 3 months at most. And then be open and free to do whatever the Lord wills of me. If it's to sell it and move and get into a used RV or something, have my books and my laptop and do my writing and videos or reading or just live and grow spiritually, get my soul better perfected. But when you do home renovation, I didn't realize just how much just in getting the materials that you interface with the temporal world. And I am convinced I'm missing something that God wants of me before I die, because he keeps having me live then. So I'm missing out on something, and I'm narrowing in on it. And one thing is to very much simplify and to focus in on God and on the spiritual life and spiritual development, praise of God, even if I would just write poetry to God. Something like that maybe he prefers than this other. So I'm doing my best to get through this bit here, and I feel good about it, that he's given his approval that I'm making progress to put all this behind me. And I'll never again take this up, obviously. I've learned my lesson in many ways. But I want today to talk about markers of mystics, or how to discern mystics. And what are the aspects of mystics, trademarks of them, markers, how you can recognize, and also including that they change too, that they grow in their spiritual life just as anyone grows, a contemplative grows. But how to discern, though, if something comes up that's questionable, and say a person is saying they're a mystic and saying they have these gifts or different things, and I had thought, in a way, just because of how life has been for me, that why don't we just break down the barriers and let mystics be mystics? And why have all this, go away and don't ever say anything, don't be yourself, and lay low and live a double life, try to fake being not what you are or how you are when you're around people. I thought, no, maybe just be myself. So here I have said, I was born a mystic and didn't realize it till I was age 34. When a friend said I was different, I didn't know the word mystic then. My ex-husband had used it in his farewell letter that he never liked my mysticism. And I had to look the word up, and I still, from the dictionary definition, I couldn't connect it. I thought, that's not me, or, no. But then when I became Catholic in 1995, the very first priest says, oh my goodness, you are a mystic. And welcome, the church is filled with mystics. And I thought, and he says, you're going to feel right at home here. You're going to feel at home. You'll fit in. No, I didn't. I never found any others in that town. And my spiritual father said he'd never met anyone like me. He says, you're very different. He says, you're wonderful different. But he says, in all my years, and he was then, I think, 85. Been a priest then, to be 60 years or something. Or no, 56 years. When he died, he'd been a priest 72 years. So anyway, but I'm rethinking this now because I want to talk about how mystics act in general, Christian mystics. Now, if they're New Age mystics, yes, they even advertise themselves and they charge and they often dress differently, sort of flamboyantly, or stand out. They're online even. They'll read you online. You pay through PayPal or something, and they'll do seances or whatever you want. And they have their videos on, doing their thing, in having their seances or putting themselves into trances and all of that. I'm talking about Christian mystics from way back, and Jewish mystics, the prophets in the Old Testament, Anna in the temple, and Simeon. Simeon was a mystic, a prophet too, or I don't know. You could be a prophet, mystic, or you could just be a prophet and then just a mystic. There's variations, but generally you're born that way. It's something that God ordains certain souls. It's what they're going to be in life, just as others are going to be in the active life. But anyone can be a contemplative, and anyone can have spiritual experiences, and they do. People do. That doesn't necessarily mean you're a mystic if you have a spiritual experience. The man, I was explaining this to the man who is my physical therapist, and I think he's about 51, 52. And he admitted, I said, because I could tell he's very sensitive. He's a spiritual human being and a Christian. And I said, you've had experiences. He was wanting to know the levels of prayer. I was saying that was Teresa of Avila's big contribution, a major one that she gave. And I took him through. He says, now what was that last one? I said, unitive. It's when God reaches in and takes you for periods of time. It can be just a glimpse, a flash. It can be a couple of minutes or 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever. That you are gone with God, 20 minutes, half hour. That doesn't necessarily mean an ecstasy, though, see. But close to it. But you're gone with God in prayer. But God's the one that reaches in when you are in a contemplative mode, when you have come to contemplative prayer. And then the Holy Spirit takes over and takes you further. But it's not of our doing. That's strictly then of God's doing. And I said, you've experienced that, haven't you? And he goes, well, yes, I have. I said, probably several times. He said, yes. So I said, I was explaining to him that it isn't anything to think that it's special or that only certain ones. And with mystics, people then general people think, active life people or contemplative things, oh, I'd love to be a mystic. I'd love to be a mystic. And some Catholics have even made definitions. I noticed that she started Magdalene House or whatever it is, Madonna House up in Canada, the Pustinia. She's a Russian woman. She's deceased now, but I noticed her definition of a mystic was anyone who loves God was her No, it's a little bit more involved than that. But you're more born that way, and you have it, and God has ordained that that's going to be your life. Of course, we have our free will, and people can go against that, but then they're not ever going to be in sync, and you're still going to be how you are, whether you don't like it or not. people will sense that of you, just like my friend when I was 34 said. And people before that had made little comments, but it didn't register. All I knew is I always had this big desire to be normal, and I did everything I could to try to fit in, especially when I got to college. And I did bad things trying to fit in. Well, not the end of the world stuff. I mean, it wasn't drugs or anything, but I wasn't just focused on studies, which I had been in high school more. I was very sensible. But in college, I was thinking, well, maybe I'll meet my husband here. I wanted to get married. It was my will or no will. I was very determined. And God did allow me to get married and to have children, but I hadn't made a wise choice, and I rushed into it and all. So, but I'm convinced that the souls that were in my children would have been my children with someone else. Not in the same way, but the souls would have been. I think God has things ordered in a beautiful way like that. Probably if I'd been reared Catholic, I would have been in the religious life. That's what I probably would have. Had I been reared in a strict Catholic home or something, or one that valued the religious life. And as my spiritual DA said, you'd do great in this religious life. You'd have to be the Mother Superior. He says you're a born leader, an organizer, and I am. And that might have been. When I was young, maybe in 4th or 5th grade, 6th grade, I really felt I would be a missionary in Africa or in India. I always had fascination. I always thought about being an African missionary. But I had this conflict with wanting to marry and be a mother also. And I didn't see the two working out. Well, yes, maybe I could have met another missionary or something. But anyway, that didn't happen. But we get these inklings. But I knew I had that sense that God wanted something more of me than the active life. And I was always very, very sensitive to things, to the mystical and to the other side. And to God was my all. When I was in 7th or 8th grade, I remember where I was sitting in the back of the high school auditorium. My mother was the teacher, and I was a drama teacher also, and her students were putting on a play, and I would always go. My dad worked and traveled, so I wasn't left home. And I think my sisters were in high school. Maybe they were in the play or something. So I wasn't left at home alone. I came and watched and was back there, and I remember distinctly waiting before the curtains were going to open and just told God, I want to do something great for you. Please let me know what you want of me in life. And I was very young to be that serious, but I said, I want to do something great for God. And it was the deep, deep desire. And I still have that. But what's great for God, as I'm finding out, can be suffering, and suffering well. And I haven't achieved that. I don't suffer well. I'm working on, I'm improving by the grace of God, and by prayer and reading of other victim souls of Jesus, and how they suffered and learned to suffer well. So that's still something to accomplish for God. But it's this thing about mystics. So, and frankly, there were some comments left. Somebody who's been saying that they're a mystic and have very sweet and left very flattering and nice comments and sweet comments, and very loving person. But I noticed the picture of the person, the screenshot, or the whatever, their screenshot, I guess it's called. I don't have one. But, and it was rather unusual. It stood out as very different. And very bright blues and bright pinks, chalky pinks and chalky blues, and white, like white clouds or white white ethereal around the head and shoulders and above, and a beautiful smile, very loving, and maybe a medallion or something medallion on the chest area, and like I think a white robe of some sort or garment, and with all this blue then around, and then pink, and it reminded me of the Virgin Mary, of like maybe a statue that is done in chalk and painted in sort of these bright colors of a religious statue. And that stood out to me as mystics try to remain unnoticed. Mystics don't want to be noticed. And I've mentioned it here, but out in the temporal, I don't tell people I'm a mystic or anything like that. I don't. I've talked more with this physical therapist because we get into these deep conversations. He's very interested and he's keen, and he's very spiritual himself. So we have talked about like a love of God and himself and these deeper spiritual topics. But generally, a mystic will not dress differently or try to dress as if special. You know what I mean? They don't want to be noticed, and they know they're not special, because the life of a mystic is very, very hard. And when things do happen through no fault of your own, and people figure out that you might be a mystic, you get these reactions of envy, of anger toward you, resentment, of fear, and then of fawning. People thinking that because God used you for something, or you're in this mode, you're born this way or whatever, that you're holier or something, or you've got these special gifts that mean that you have arrived. No, God just uses mystics as he wills, and it doesn't mean that they have achieved any kind of level of greatness. In some cases, yes. Not in mine. I had experiences way back, because God utilizes you as he wills. But he knew that I was sensitive, like when we had this child ghost in our home that was connected with a little nursery school and back. And I innately knew how to get the child ghost to leave us alone, leave my 4-year-old alone in particular, to stop the poltergeist stuff. And I reassured it. I tried to send it on its way. And it was like a in the wrong world, it wasn't good, and it could have been even demonic or something. It wasn't right. It's opening and closing doors. It would be a ball of light that would dart around a corner. It would plug in an iron, poltergeist kinds of things. And then it was talking with my 4-year-old. And from that point on, shortly after, my 4-year-old would refuse to pray. And she really hasn't ever since. I mean, it did damage to my eldest daughter, spirit, in this religious aspect, as a 4-year-old. And there was a few months after we had moved out of there, every night there was this horrible smell when my little girl would be asleep, like by 8:30 or 9, when she'd be asleep an hour. And I had my husband come in with me, and I said, we both pray the Lord's Prayer over her. And because this is not right. This odor was devil stench. And that left. but she has remained resistant to church and to God ever since. And so I keep praying about that. And so these things are realities that happen. But a mystic will have an affinity with them and know how to handle them innately and quietly with prayer. And then when I became Catholic, there are other aspects to learn more about the devil. I learned far more to handle these things. The devil is very against the Mother of God. A rosary, actually, exorcists use those, but you'll notice, at least with the Christian mystics, they don't want to be noticed, they don't want to stand out, and they will go at more lengths to appear to blend in. And they're normal. Teresa of Avila is a great example. She didn't mince words with people. Padre Pio, if you went into his confessional and were doing baloney with him, pulling the wool and avoiding sins or talking truth, or weren't prepared or whatever, and you didn't really have sincere contrition, he could read that, he could sense, and he would order them out. And he was harsh. He was harsh. In fact, my spiritual father thought, in a way, maybe that's why it took longer for him to be canonized, because he was so harsh. And I said, no, it was all the right. They had to go through so much. The more spiritual gifts you have, and the more writings and letters that people have written, and he wrote, it takes them so long to review everything. Everything has to be checked out. And that ended up why it took longer for him. Mother Teresa didn't have those kinds of, they're now calling, some say she's a mystic. No, she wasn't. She didn't, you just have to compare and know these markers. But she was a contemplative, a great contemplative. She knew how to pray at the contemplative level, and I'm assuming and sure that the Holy Spirit reached in and took her into the unitive in her prayer also. But she was her mission was in the active works of mercy. And great leadership skills, as it turned out, too. She had to organize all this, because after Malcolm Muggeridge came and did a documentary, she was swamped with people from all over the world coming to join and help in her movement, help her. So, and God, the Holy Spirit, they enacted that. God determined. He wanted her to be a worldwide example. Well, I'm sure there were religious sisters in Africa and other places, feeding and helping the poor. But God didn't have a Malcolm Muggeridge come and do a documentary that opened it up to the world. He chose Mother Teresa of Calcutta for God's reasons. You could see maybe there would be sisters who had spent their whole lives at the same lifetime in other poor countries, giving their lives helping the poor and feeding and tending them. And maybe they felt, wow, I'm doing all this, and we're human, and she's getting all this help and all this worldwide attention, and canonized without the usual time period, process was waived and all. And God chose that and allowed those circumstances. No Malcolm Muggeridge found those other women or men. So, but I'm sure, even if they had a glimpse of that thought, these holy people would drive it away. They're not into envy, into wanting to be important or anything like that. And Mother Teresa didn't either. She did not want all that. She did not want to start a religious order. Her bishop told her she needed to, and it proved to be sort of the best thing, because she did need help at that time. And that's when it really grew then, and she really needed the structure of religious order with all the young women who wanted to join her. And it was a beautiful thing, and it still is. The Sisters of Charity are all over now doing great works. So it's how God wants things to be that they happen. And people who are religious and who are um, genuinely so, even though they might have a little speck of like, well, I don't have anyone helping me and no one's noticed. I'm spending my life doing the same thing, but it didn't blow up big. Immediately they would know, Lord, forgive me for that bit of temporal wanting glory or vainglory or whatever, pride or something. Yes, and they would just move on. And so that's something to note in mystics also, is that they generally don't, like if they have gifts, we'll say, example, a gift of healing or something. They don't go around telling people. It usually gets found out by happen chance. Someone's sick and the person may go visit them and just lay a hand on them or something, or say a prayer, and they have some kind of instantaneous healing. And they wonder, well, how did that happen? Or I felt all this warmth in my body or something when this person prayed for me. And they start to connect it, and then someone else it happens, and then they connect it, and then word starts to spread. We think that this person has this gift of healing. And then the person maybe realizes it and tells their spiritual director, I think God gave me this gift of healing. Or they might know it. An angel maybe came and anointed them and said, you are going to be given a gift of healing. Or maybe not. Maybe it just started occurring. They realize. I think there's a young priest in Ireland who it just came upon him. He started noticing that he would touch or pray or something and people would be healed. And his bishop found out, and he now goes and does healing masses. That's his main charism now. His main work is not being a parish priest, but helping to heal people. And sometimes these gifts go away too. They're taken away. They can be for time periods. They're not always forever. But that priest isn't a mystic, but he has this gift of healing. Briege McKenna, I think she is a mystic, and she has a gift of healing and some other gifts too. And she's an Irish religious sister who I think has written some books, and I read her biography or autobiography years ago. Well, this first priest gave it to me. I think he was really hoping that I would be somebody like that. No, my main thing is suffering. That's the main thing that God has me doing. And talking and trying to help, I guess, share things. So mystics would not be out there in their clothing. They would not dress as if they are holy or angelic or like the Virgin Mary in colors like that. And they wouldn't, a Christian mystic would wear a cross. Most people don't wear a big cross, but this was given to me in a unique way. This was sort of a miraculous way this was given to me. I've shared it in another video where I didn't even know the people, and it was way across the big room, and a woman waved me over and opened a drawer, and I think this is supposed to be yours. And I had just given away a brand new regular crucifix that I had purchased at a Catholic gift shop, and had given it away to a child who loved it. A strange child, in the Walmart or something. Oh, look at that, Mommy, could I have that? And asked me if he could have it. And yes, I gave it to him. So I was without a crucifix, and this was given to me, and it was so unusual. I'd never been in that building before. So this one I keep and wear. But I have this one because of something else that happened, and I'm not sure I'm going to share it, but it's this size because Jesus did something to me and put a crucifix, well, I'll say, he put a crucifix right down into my heart, right down through. One morning, stood by the side of my bed, was after the open door thing, and he was showing me, this is suffering. You have been crucified yet again with that, because it was very upsetting to me to be run out of the soup kitchen. But God had something else for me to do then. So, but yes, he was standing by my bed, and he brought this a crucifix down and just put it right down here into my chest. And it burned and burned and burned and was so painful. And then it became sweet, 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 sweet in me. And it's down in there now. I don't know if it's tangible, if it left a mark or not. Deep down inside of me. It didn't at the time make any external mark. But I felt it and I saw it. And so this is about the size of it. It was slightly bigger than one he put, but it looked about like this. And it would have been 3 years prior to my being given this, 4 years prior to the unusual circumstances of being given this. So I try to even have it pretty much at the spot where Jesus put this other in me. So that is something that a Christian mystic would likely wear a crucifix on the outside or on the inside of their clothing. If I'm going to be around people who would be put off, I would cause occasion of sin, I put it on the inside of me, under my clothes, to not cause others upset or anger. It's not that I'm afraid, that I'm trying not to be a Christian, but if it's going to be a situation that is going to cause contention, they can know I'm a Christian by my love in that way, then, without seeing my big crucifix. My Mormon neighbor has commented about my crucifix a couple of times. Well, with that big crucifix you wear around, but she doesn't understand. See, I haven't told her everything about me, obviously. So, what else about mystics? They get insights, they do get locutions, but anyone can. I'm sure just about everybody out there, even active work people who God chooses to have active works of mercy, they'll get locutions in their life. Maybe not often, or maybe they'll have one or two peak spiritual experiences in their life that are life-altering. And that's it. Mystics tend to have quite a bit of even unusual interactions with people, unusual things happening, because a mystic is constantly thinking in terms of God and in desire for love of God, and is very intense on practically single-mindedness of, like my handyman the other day said, oh, you got Jesus, Jesus everywhere in here. One of my houses, I finished it, and I had all my artwork, and the inspector, or the appraisal for the bank came, the appraiser. I had a buyer, and the appraiser came for his loan, and he says, looks like you have a misplaced vocation here. Were you supposed to be a religious sister or something? Everything in here is just all... I said, no. But I said, I just love God. I love religion. I love holy people. I have artwork of a friend of mine's an artist, and he's given me some of, he does drawings and charcoal drawings and etchings and woodcuts and watercolors of scenes from the scriptures. Oh, I love those. I have one right over there where Jesus is lifting Peter up out of the water. When Peter started to walk, and then he looked down, he lost his bearing, looked down, lost his faith, and And the Lord had to reach out and help pull him up. Lord, help me. Peter was sinking. But he had walked some on the water. He had that faith. So yes, and I used to, in other homes, I would Old English script, like above on the woodwork above the doors. It was dark red oak, and I would do it in gilt or other colors, like for the dining room, bread of life, and different Latin phrases over others. And I had a door dedicated to the priest who had preached against me as a prayer for him. I refinished it, and then above that, I put I think forever a priest in Latin. Father Fahey was always helping me with Latin. In high school, I was desperate to take Latin. Go figure. My mother wouldn't let me. That's what I wanted to take. It would have been great because our English language is so much based on Latin vocabulary. A lot of it is. But there was something in me that later I realized it was religious. That even back then, I'm just born this way. When I was little, we had these oak floors. I would lay on the floor and stretch out, there was one spot where the oak boards went this way and then some went this way. And I would get my arms on the ones going this one and my feet down, and I would writhe around. I wanted, like 3 or 4, I remember the Venetian blinds of the old house, and the sunlight was coming in, and I was trying to experience what it was like for Jesus to be on the cross. And later, when I was older, I thought that was a little bit weird for, after I was told, that by this priest and then my spiritual father also, and other priests then, and trying to figure out, well, when did this start? Was this my fault? Did I bring this on? Did I do something? No, it was just in me. It was in me. And yet I was heading out into the world when my God had to have the accident, get my husband away from me, and then had to maim me so I wouldn't continue on in the world occupation. He wanted me for himself and for some other things, for prayer and for suffering, and he brought me into the Catholic Church, which I will share my conversion story. But so mystics are that way. It isn't something that's put on. And they shrink away from putting anything on like that. And they don't like flattery and fawning. They see right through it. If someone's going on and, brown nosing them or something, like in comments or whatever. You guys have it. You have it. Thank you. But, or have these expectations of great holiness. No. Now, Teresa, if they get far enough and they're great and better people than me, like Teresa of Avila and Joan of the Cross, they came to union while they were still alive, in bits and pieces of it anyway, and even extended time periods. And Teresa would have, I think she had an ecstasy once that they said lasted like 3 days. It was like she was in a coma. It was a big turning point in her religious life. That's what it was too. But she stopped praying. She stopped praying for about 10 years. As far as outer kind of praying. And she busied herself more with her active works of mercy. And that's unusual. But inwardly, because it says, I researched these things and I'd read it, but inwardly, I think whoever writes those things doesn't understand that that her life had become prayer. That she was so with God that it was an ongoing prayer of an inner, like when we're dead, we thought flash. We instantaneously thought flash. And back and forth, instantaneous thought flashing. And it becomes like that, and so fast that it's no longer you don't even recognize you're talking or communicating or sensing, and it's not words anymore. It's a sense or a essence of love. So, but then, like if somebody would to a mystic, oh, you're my teacher, you're my, this and that, and no, mystics are students. Mystics are students. And maybe God has told them you are to help teach others, stabilize their emotions through spirituality, or help them with their spiritual growth. But that's not the same as being a teacher of a person, of, to pass on being a mystic. No, no, you don't learn it from other mystics. They're students. They're very docile to any kind of instruction, provided it's a good instructor. As Teresa of Avila said, a bad spiritual director, you're better off with none at all on earth. But it's important for mystics, especially if you're hearing voices, locutions, frequently even, to talk them over with someone else, like a priest, or if you're a Protestant, with your minister, or someone with a theology degree, or someone with a Bible degree, to make sure that what you're being told matches up with Scripture. And it could be the book of Revelation Scripture, but it needs to. Jesus isn't going to tell you things that aren't what is his truth himself, that would go against himself. And if you're having lots and lots of them, you do need to have an earthly spiritual guide who is adept in the spiritual life. So you may have to ask many, many ministers and many priests. And if you're Protestant, you can't find a minister. I remember way back asking around ministers and even a district superintendent if they had any experience with some of the stuff that was going on with me. And they didn't. And they scoffed too. They didn't like it. And they thought it was evil or something wrong with me, or I was a mental case or something. It's another thing. Well, anyway, you need to get someone. And a Protestant, if you're having these experiences, a Catholic priest is not going to turn you away. Now, you can't monopolize their time. They're very, very busy. They usually have large flocks that they're shepherding. And there's a shortage of priests. So, make it reasonable what you're asking, and just get some advice on, can you help me discern? Discern's the word, discern. Is this of God? Is this legitimate? Is this the devil? Is this something in my mind? Something that even subconsciously I want so badly that it's being created and I don't even know. It can happen. But the devil is very, very cunning and tricky and clever. The devil can move right, Jesus can give you some messages, and then the devil can stick one in every now and then. And then the devil can start sticking in more. And pretty soon the devil can stick in a bad one. And there's a big example of this in the 3rd century with a desert father. And other desert fathers wrote of it and used it as an example for novices, for others that would come out. And they did not teach these other hermits, if they happen to be a mystic, but many of them weren't mystics, they were contemplatives. But if they happen to be, they're not teaching how to be a mystic, because you don't teach that. That's God's domain right there. And that's how you learn, and that's how you grow, because you're created that way. And it's not a matter of learning how to be this or that way. You may need to learn protocols like I'm learning. Maybe it wasn't right for me to talk about my mystic life or experiences here on this, because it brought out someone who then has created some doubt. Definitely not a Christian mystic the person isn't, by things Jesus keeps telling the person. And isn't in a church. Says Jesus told her not to be in a church. Not to be in any stay clear of any organized religion. All of them are organized. All of them are. Even a startup church that started last week is organized. I have to organize it. We have to have organization, as I pointed out before. It's that we don't get too caught up and just keep our minds in the organized part. We move on in the spiritual growth, in the development of our souls. That's where we're headed, with the development of our souls and scripture and learning love, learning pure love through learning God's pure love, becoming so intimate in God that we love in and through God's love. So, where was I on that point? Oh, yes, spiritual direction's important, especially if you're having lots of locutions and ones that are not matching up with reality or with what Jesus would really say, per scripture or per his life, even. So, say I put out a test for a person, and I said, you need to test this stuff about how you're not allowed to have anything to do with religion, and you think the person at one point mentioned had been a Catholic and was no longer a Catholic, is how it was put, no longer a Catholic. Fine, but no longer in any churches, not any Christian churches, because Jesus said not to. Well, who started the Christian church? Who's the head? Who said he was the head? And we are the body. He's the vine, we are the branches. Who gave the Last Supper? Read John 13 through John 17. Even read before that with Jesus' sacerdotal prayers in the upper room, all that he taught. And we don't know all he taught his apostles. He came back after he was crucified, but before he ascended. He was on earth many times, meeting with his apostles and talking with them and explaining. He asked Peter, he changed Simon's name to Peter, Cephas. Said, you are the rock, and upon this rock I will build my church. In so many words. He was handing over the keys to Peter. He wanted Peter to be the leader of the 12 apostles. Peter was the eldest. He had a lot of leadership qualities. The other younger men looked up to him, looked up to Peter. He had the most life experience. So the church was based on that. Jesus then later, when he came back, before he ascended on Ascension Thursday, he explained about going out and how to go out 2 by 2. Take very little with you. Go out and tell the whole world. And so Jesus was specific. That's organizing. That's organizing. And to do the communion, to consecrate bread and wine, and it would become his body and blood, to pray over it, to institute it, to consecrate it, the consecration, and taught his apostles that. And that has succeeded down over all these centuries. It's been handed down from priest to priest to priest to priest. Peter wasn't called a priest. I forget, I looked it up when priest was first used. Bishop was used quite a bit early on, very early on, the word bishop. I think priest was a little later. But I think that was probably because the temple priests and the early Christians wanted to make a division between the temple priests and Christianity. So they used the word bishop more, and deacons. But it was all laid out it was organized to that degree. The spiritual aspects that the temporalized outer, the tangibles of great spiritual impact and import. So Jesus was melding the tangible for us temporalites with the spiritual and the numinous through the reception of body and blood of Christ. And as strength and help and as a reality, it is a reality, and it brings the spiritual with the temporal together in our temporal lives, because we are spiritual and temporal on earth. We have our souls and our spiritual beings as well as our temporal matter. So Jesus knew that and accommodated for this and for our own benefit, our spiritual and temporal benefit to get through this life and many other aspects. So I did this test of just go to church. If you don't want to go to Catholic one, but since you were brought up Catholic or whatever, go to Catholic one. Talk to a priest. Just join. Or go to another Christian and join it. See what happens. Is God going to strike you down? Find out. If he's angry with you for joining a church that he started and he wanted us to be a part of on earth. I said, you don't have to, if you have a reason not to be in a church grouping. I can't do that sitting anymore on the pews. It kills my back. And then I had become such a problem with the ecstasy. It was like having a reverse, not good. And so here I am. And it's been going well, but I'm a member of a parish. And I was thinking, when I was getting so sick, maybe have the last rites or the anointing of the sick. I was at that point of calling a priest. So, and I'm very much in the church. I would never not be in the church or any church. Jesus, the one that insisted I be Catholic. And so to have Jesus tell someone, it's never been done. I've read probably 200 Christian mystics or more. And then of all the little synopses of them, I bet it's 500 at least of them or more. Never has Jesus said, you're not allowed to be in a church. But then the person immediately back, well, Jesus just told me I'm not to be Catholic. He doesn't want that, not to be. And I said, well, you could have gone, but Jesus wouldn't. That goes against Scripture. He started the church. And I said, unless you are already dead somehow, but your body's still here, but you're already ascended into heaven, and therefore you don't need to be in a church because you're already in the church triumphant of heaven. But that's not the case. And then, but you're my teacher. No, I'm not. I'm the student. I'm a student. So I'm learning. I probably shouldn't have said anything about mystics, maybe. I don't know. But that's another marker. If they're getting messages that are red flags, if they stand out as different, I mean intentionally, by their clothing, or their attitudes. I talked a little bit about a Teresa of Avila in a video. Next thing I know, comment, well, I share most of the gifts that Teresa of Avila has. But, frustrated God hasn't used me and blah, blah, blah. And when I've tried to, and this is not me, it's this other person, said when they would want to heal people, they would refuse. They didn't want her to. So Jesus told her, well, you have to wait till you're asked by someone. It's all this, it's just a little too convenient. Jesus with the excuses and everything. But then the person is mentioned about being just so horribly lonely. And all the person's friends and contacts have dropped away because they say she's mentally ill. Now, there were some that said Jesus was crazy. Even some of his family members did. And some of the people, some of his followers, when he had, I think he had like up to 72 or more, well, they say these numbers, but there were quite a few followers, and many of them left when he told them about how to eat his body and drink his blood, and you will have true life in you. That's too crazy for us. We're out of here. Many of them walked away, left. His 12 didn't, and others didn't also. But if you're having even 25% of the people you know and are close with start calling you mentally ill and want nothing to do with you, that's a red flag. And if you see somebody like that and they saying they're a mystic, that's a marker there that something isn't quite. Teresa of Avila, yes, there were some people who didn't like her, that's for sure. Some of her own sisters before the monastery there in Avila, the convent that she was in at first, big Carmelite. When she had her awakening, when she was like 48, 49, something like 47, and realized this is just like a social club here. We're not doing anything. They didn't do anything to advance their spiritual souls or their lives, their spiritual lives. But they loved all the treats and the goodies and the sweets and the fineries that the townspeople would bring, because everyone wants to build up, they do that to put them on pedestals. But the sisters loved this finery and this, but it wasn't the same as Hildegard of Bingen. Hildegard of Bingen, at the same time as being brides of Christ and singing, but they were learning and reading the scriptures and growing in the spiritual life and learning love of God and love of neighbor. And she did a lot of good, as did her sisters, out in their fields and out also in trying to clean up corruption in the German church. She did a lot of writing of documents and getting people to understand that these things aren't right. The corruption is not right at all. So Teresa had her sisters turned on her when they realized that she was doing what she was supposed to do, what someone who wants to follow Christ is going to do. Live very humbly, remain hidden, or at least not puffed up or showing themselves quiet, humble, meek, in the likeness of Jesus, following Jesus. And but if anyone was devoted to church, when the Reformation happened, Teresa of Avila was crushed. And it was in Germany. It hadn't spread yet. But she, being the mystic that she is, she could see that it would. She saw what was going to happen and how it was going to come down into Switzerland, into France, and then eventually get into Spain. And they already were dealing with the Moors, with Islam that had come. And it was hard. But her whole life was in effect helping build up Christ's church all the more for people. At the end of her life, she had developed 13 different convents throughout this area of Spain, and had a real movement going. And John of the Cross, she got John of the Cross to, he was younger, And he was her spiritual director at a time, and also for her sisters in some of her convents. Until then, he started to reform the men Carmelites, and they nearly killed him. And in the end, they did, essentially, because they had brutalized him so much he lost his health. But he didn't mind. He was so ready for God. He had gotten to the point where joy was something that was awful for him because it would hasten his death. Either way, he was willing to stay or to go, whatever God willed. And whatever anyone did to him then, he did not resent. He took it all as from the hand of God. But so we have to sort of be alert to these things. And it's not like, well, I'll do all these check marks then, and then I will pass myself off as a mystic. It's not going to work. I had wondered about this one particular case. I think sort of the fawning at first was a little bit much. And something wasn't feeling right. But I went along, and I always know that it will unfold. It will unfold. It will be opened up. Enough will be said or shared, and that won't be right. But I was really hoping this time, because the person's very loving and sweet, that would take this test. It would test the spirits. I said, test the spirits, and would just do that simple thing and see what happens. And then go talk to a Bible scholar, or a pastor, or a priest, a minister, or a priest. They know the Bible very well. Go to a Bible church minister and say, would Jesus instruct someone to not have anything to do with religion, and to definitely not be Catholic? When the church in AD 70 was first called Catholic, that was the first time that name was given to it by people, was Catholic. Catholic Church, it was known it off and on throughout then, still today, Catholic Church. Can be the Eastern or the Western, because there was this schism in 1030. We human beings, we don't get along too well, do we? But in a way, I think God, he allows things. It was getting so huge, and the cultures are so different. Perhaps, I don't know. We'll find out when we get to the other side. If that's even important, it probably isn't. The main thing is to love God. The Eastern Orthodox do, we do, the Western Church does, the Protestants do. But this thing on being a mystic and then not having the keynote markers that hold true over a long period of time, have to sort of reconsider that, I think. And I do too. I'm starting to understand better why it's best to lay low. See, I'm learning still. And it's reassuring me that because I've had misgivings at times. I think, well, should I try Mass again? Should I go over to that parish? It's a different priest now, and see, and he's from Nigeria. He's not in the same community that Reverend Father Vincent's in Nigeria, but he's here, and this other one is here, and I thought maybe he would understand better, more. They're more spiritually aware sometimes in religious communities, than diocese priests, because diocese priests have to have so much seminary instruction on administration of parishes and dioceses and stuff. It's sad, but it's needed because we're in a temporal world, and people want to sit in padded pews, and they want to have a roof overhead when they go to church, and some places even have the bistros in them. Some of the evangelical churches, I've noticed, will have like little coffee houses and breakfast bars. You go in and can have lattes and things after church or before church. Doesn't matter. Now, Catholics fast before having communion. So, and I don't think they would ever go that route of, and they wouldn't have a stage with the band on it, things like that. But I'm not saying there's anything wrong if that's part of the protocol of an evangelical church and it's attractive to people. I know in the Catholic Church and in many Protestant churches, they'll have a traditional music, and then they'll have usually the more youth mass on a Sunday evening or something will have more contemporary type music, guitar playing, and a couple guitars, maybe. I don't know if they have a drum, maybe, doesn't matter. In Africa, the music's entirely different. I got a CD of African Mass, and it's quite enlivened, and people are just very emotive, and it's delightful. So it's sort of a locale thing, even, of how the actual liturgy is, or the songs and the affect of the people, and we just go with the flow. So, but orthodoxy can be throughout. And I guess this is sort of the same thing with mystics. They'll tend to be orthodox. And take Teresa of Avila and John of the Cross again. They're very serious. They're intense. Teresa she was active works of mercy. She suffered. She was ill a lot of her life, quite a bit of her life, even as a young woman. But her other suffering was in other ways, and having to do all this hard work. But God gave her the energy. And of course, back when I was doing the soup kitchen, I was amazed, and it was miraculous. My mother was so thrilled that I was able to do this weekend of soup and working in the kitchen and helping and organize it. And we were going to expand it. And this one man that we enjoyed, we were going to get a vacant storefront and have during the week people there willing to talk with people coming in off the street, talk to them about God, or have little Bible studies, the introductory ones, little deeper ones, things for children, for preschoolers, just to have coffee and donuts or whatever the people like to eat, coffee, cake, try to get something healthy, and maybe even do a soup and sandwich thing for lunch. The sky was the limit where we were taking it, but that all stopped because God had other plans for me, mainly, I think, and I had probably pushed the volunteers to the max that they could mentor, except for this man who was helping me. He was more open to the vision of where this could go, and there were other people helping support us. They couldn't do that much themselves because they had all their businesses and their families, but like one man donated part of his business warehouse for us to keep all of the furniture and things that were being donated, that we could keep them in his warehouse until a call came in of, we delivered soup to somebody and they need a crib for the baby, or they need beds for the little children. The children are sleeping on the floor. And there I had a crew of delivery people, men who would, with their pickup trucks, would go then and get the item from the warehouse and take it to the person, the recipients. So, but anyway, it was miraculous. I was given that energy, and I thought, God gave Teresa of Avila that for all those years, that she developed 13 different foundations. And she would physically go and help do the work, cleaning them up and fixing them up if she got a derelict place donated for them to have, an old ramshackle house or something, or the diocese had some old place that the bishop said, you can have this. We could use a convent in this area of Spain, and so she did a lot of hands-on, despite being ill and being older, being past 50 then. So she died at age 67. And Abbé de Tormes. So that was where my apartment was going to be if I was going to stay there. Oh, but I had to get back and tend to business with this priest back in the Midwest. So that was that. And my pain couldn't tolerate the heat. Hottest summer in Avila in 10 years back in 2005. It was summer of 2005. But I was there for what I needed, and that was this Dr. Elizabeth Wilhelmsen teaching this wonderful class on John of the Cross, and of being there where Teresa and John had been, and many others. And it's just something I'm very blessed to have even been able to make the trip with my body. I did have a siege when I got there, and so it's one of those things. But mystics, they will have certain aspects of them that are run through all of the Christian mystics, and many of them run through the Jewish mystics, the Sikh mystics, the Hindu mystics, the whatever other mystics. So, but the Christian mystics will adhere to Scripture. Their messages will. They won't wear a medallion. They'll wear a cross. If someone says test of spirits, this doesn't sound right, they would be mortified and would immediately go get it checked out. And if they were isolated out because of everybody saying they were mentally ill, in fact, when I had different experiences, I went right to Dr. H before I was Catholic. And am I crazy? I was that first day or morning after my friend on Thanksgiving evening of 1985 said, you have things, you have dreams, and you see things, and you see through people like the rest of us don't. We don't experience stuff like you do. But we love you anyway. She said, we love you. We all love you. We like you. And I kept my cool, but boy, I was freaked out. Dr. H got me at 6 o'clock in the morning because I called him in tears that night. He answered his answering service. I said, it's an emergency. Oh, I'm crazy. I'm crying. No, I'm crazy. Something's wrong with me. Something's very wrong, And when I had my spiritual daw, I would go through everything with him, and we went back and forth trying to figure out this ecstasy thing. And because I doubted that, except what I was afraid of was that the devil was doing it just to have people even be worse toward me or sense something different about me, because I didn't want people to know that I was different. And so I begged the bishop to have me exorcised, but no, you're not that. They knew that. They knew, and the Reverend Monsignor, they're adept in these things. They can tell you have to have certain markers that you need to be exorcised, and I didn't. But they still, I don't think in the end could get, they just came up with that it was inappropriate. I think they thought that I was making it happen and that something deep in my subconscious wanted it to happen. So I don't know why, get attention. The bishop said one time, he says, if you don't stand and make it go away. But see, I didn't come back with, oh, but Jesus says I'm not to stand. Jesus doesn't want me to. No. I obeyed, even though I said I don't think this is a good idea. But I did ask him, if I do it, would you please read this book on mystical phenomenon, because it explains all of this. It explains it all in detail. And I told the bishop I was shown this book in a vision that it would help me understand, and it did. And it would help you understand this. Because I said, I don't blame you for not getting it because his eyes don't get it. I didn't blame him at all. Why would he? It's not common, but it's not unheard of either. So, that I don't know. No, what's her name? Catherine of Siena had ecstasies during Mass. She was able to receive communion though, but her mouth would open. Mine did, but after a while, mine couldn't. I was just too gone. God had me too far in bliss. But Catherine maybe didn't get to that point yet because the rector had her hauled out by the ushers and dumped on the sidewalk outside. So maybe she didn't go back for a while or something, or for good even. We don't know all these things. What happened after that? So, and she did die at age 33, so could have been that that was toward the end, and she was getting sick, actually. But we just have to be careful. But yes, that would be the first thing a mystic would do, would be want to test messages like that, where Jesus would say, you're not allowed to be Catholic. You're not allowed to be in any church. You're supposed to stay away from any organized religions. Then, when I did present this test and came back with, Jesus says, I'm not to share with you anymore. And the reason was because it was taking me away from my calling. Well, part of my calling is to help souls. It's part of everyone's calling to help souls. And if we see someone who seems to be deceived on at least 3 messages from Jesus, including the one that you're not supposed to share anymore with me because it takes me away from my calling, but that's my calling, is to help souls, especially ones who say they're mystics and yet they're showing these gross anomalies. They are way outside anything of a Christian mystic would do and would live and would be like. So that one was wrong too, that message from Jesus. And it wasn't taking me away from anything. I was here working with the handyman, but I was thinking these things through and praying about it. But I think what it was is when that came through, then I got right forthright. And I will, and I'm a little bit too much, maybe too much that way. I no longer was pandering. I wasn't babying. Because I saw this is serious. And this is someone who I think is deceived. Either a self-deception, that Jesus is saying all these things to the person. Maybe the person does share the gifts of Teresa of Avila. If so, though, the person wouldn't be acting like the person's acting. And wouldn't dress like the person's dressing, and wouldn't have these messages. And Teresa wouldn't have anything to do with the person. Say, come back when you're ready to get serious here. And stop the baloney. Stop the deception. Nobody wants to be a mystic who is a mystic. Of that, I'm sure. Because you're already then outside the normal construct. But you live it and you give it your best, because that's what God has asked, has made us. But yes, there have been mystics who went against God. Like that desert father I was telling you about, who kept getting these messages. And then the devil would start poking one's in. And before long, and usually does with the ego, like he thought, wow, the devil will puff up the person. and feed them even what they're supposed to say that sounds good. Like, well, I know Jesus wants me this way, and even though I'm very lonely, or I'd love to have a husband, but this is what Jesus wants of me, so I will do it, even though I don't like it. I don't quite work that way either, but can be very, very pious acting, and it gets to the pride, and they want to be that way. They want to be special and a mystic, and wait and see what's going to come next. And like that priest wanted me to be some kind of important thing for him. And when he saw I wasn't, I'm a victim soul, a suffering servant. And a lot of my mystic was messages that Mary would tell me about him and what he was up to. And I didn't like that. That's a horrible position to be in. It's not fun. And then you're caught, He himself, you're supposed to tell me everything. Well, some of the stuff I had to tell him that I saw, that Virgin Mary showed me of him and Jesus showed me, wasn't pretty. And I even stopped then. I stopped. It got so bad, 2 angels showed me the door. They took over with him because he was getting vicious toward me. And if he had hit me, I don't know if he had hit me in the face. He was readying to. He was losing it. And God knew that he was over the brink. And so I was taken off the assignment by these angels, 2 angels. And I was relieved, to tell you the truth. He was more than, he was getting, he would have done something, would have gotten him in trouble and been a real harm to the church, because he had good leadership capabilities as an older man. But anyway, autocratic. He was an autocratic leader, but it worked for him. So I didn't like having to be harsh the other day, or seemed to me. It wasn't harsh. I just was honest. I didn't have a lot of time to play around with it anymore. And then when the person still wanted to come back, all this, but thank you for being such a good teacher for me, good teacher. No, I'm not your teacher. I couldn't teach anyone who had those kinds of messages, because they're beyond my comprehension. Either the person's so far beyond any of us here on earth, and any of the saints and the Christian mystics like Teresa of Avila or John of the Cross, who were stalwarts of the church, of Christ's church. What can you do with that, with a person who says Jesus is telling them all these other things and then says, I'm not supposed to talk to you anymore? Jesus says, can't share anything with you because I'm taking you away from your calling. Very clever. The devil is very, very clever. I thought, that's the devil talking right there. Putting it back on me is the reason why a person can't say anything more about her life that doesn't have the markers of genuine mystic. Not Christian, anyway. I wrote back and said, you might be New Age. That fits the New Age. It certainly does, yes. Mm-hmm. So, okay, this is a discussion of mystics, and I think we do need to be accountable to one another on this earth. And if you, probably all the friends and acquaintances that have dropped away is probably the best thing they could do. Some of them probably tried with the person, but if someone is, I would never allow someone to touch me or want to heal me who was being influenced, deceived by the devil. or by their own selves. I wouldn't mess with it. And they probably had an instinct about it anyway. Or who was dressed oddly or in a way that is sort of promoting themselves as someone holy. I wouldn't touch it. So, sorry to be so, and if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. Then Jesus will let me know sooner or definitely at my judgment if I didn't pick up on all the little markers that weren't there and that were sort of the opposite of what Christian mystic would be, of the ones that I've read about. And I think I'm going to just lay off. I've learned it's wisdom to lay low. It just is. I feel maybe safe, anonymous here. But then again, I do wonder if this is pleasing to God. I'll probably always wonder it. But for now, the next thing I think I want to talk about is get back into the things on love that John Climacus talks about. I want to do my conversion story, and then I want to get to the next fruit of the Spirit after forbearance. What's next? I think it's peace. So, okay. God bless His real presence in us. And sorry I took so long, but it is distressing. I love people. I care about people, and I do get concerned. And I'm a take the ball by the hands and go with it, dribble it down the court and stick it through the net kind of person. And test that spirit and get that out of the way and get yourself back into a church. Some Christian church. Or give it up, or go into your new age then. But don't play the game. No baloney zone. No baloney zone here. Okay. God bless His real presence in us. God forgive us all of our human flaws and my own lack of somehow expressing in sweet ways. I'm just not. I'm not good at. I think I would have been a terrible clinical psychologist. I wouldn't have probably taken 5 months to ease somebody into something. Probably after 3 or 4 weeks, I would just boom. So glad that Dr. H is, and that I'm just here trying to do better with my suffering and forbearing my handyman as he is me. So I thought I'd just shut this off. Here I am. Good afternoon, and please pray for me to improve my soul. I even see what I do wrong or have lacking in me, and maybe part of its personality. And these knives sticking in my back all the time with pain doesn't help. But I am trying to do what one viewer says, just don't even mention it. And then it won't like ingrain. The pain won't be re-ingrained in me. So, all right. Talk to you guys later. Love you all. Thanks for forbearing me, all of you.